Hello, and thank you for checking out the Littrell Show, building businesses, bars, and brands. My name is Jason, and today I'm joined by the Executive Director of the New York City Hospitality Alliance, Mr. Andrew Rigie. He's been extraordinarily busy recently, and so I'm so delighted that he was able to give us a little bit of time to explain the work of the Hospitality Alliance and how they are impacting change and how they are affecting change in the hospitality industry on the local, state, and federal level. So please welcome Mr. Andrew Rigie. Welcome to the show, Andrew Rigie.
Thanks for having me.
So I have a million questions for you. You are, in my opinion, kind of like the Dr. Fauci of the hospitality industry. You are consistently diagnosing problems and kind of telling us what we need to do to solve them with your messaging through the Hospitality Alliance. If you were, there's so much going on. It's so complex. Tell me what your day is like today. Let's just start there. What are you covering today?
Well, first, you were very generous in your description, and thanks for having me on the show.
You're welcome, Doctor.
Every day is different, but it's the same, which I've been hearing from other people as well. I am on constant meetings with government officials, constant meetings with restaurant, bar, nightclub owners, doing round-the-clock town halls with different industry groups, elected officials, government officials, business owners, operators, really just doing our absolute best to get a grasp on the size and scope of the issue and what the fixes are, both in the immediate crisis and then the midterm and really long-term recovery for the city's hospitality industry.
So you're in constant communication with New York primarily. A big part of what you do is communicating with the local government, which happens to be like kind of one of the global hubs of nightlife.
Absolutely.
So what's the response been from the city of New York?
Listen, I think this is unique in such that the restaurant nightlife industry is at the core of what's happening here. I keep saying that the nation's economy and New York City's economy is not going to recover unless restaurants and nightlife is at the core of that recovery. In New York City alone, there's more than 25,000 eating and drinking establishments employing more than 300,000 people. So we're not only critical and vital to the local economy, but also the social landscape. I mean, when you walk down the street, what gives New York City its vibrancy? It's the restaurants, it's the nightlife. Why do people move here from around the world? Well, a huge reason is to be part of our restaurant, our nightlife industry, go out to their local restaurant. We employ people from all walks of life. It doesn't matter what industry you're from. You probably have a relationship to your local pub, to your favorite, neighborhood cafe. If you're one of the 70 million tourists that come to New York City every year, you're coming here to go out and eat and drink and experience our culture and our Broadway shows. So we are such a part of the city, and we are the place where people come together, not for social distancing, but to gather and to socialize. So this crisis is having an extraordinarily devastating impact on our industry. And I am confident, unfortunately, that when we start to come out of the social distancing and quarantining, there's going to be profound effects on the recovery of our industry.
So there's been kind of a historically contentious relationship between the Hospitality Alliance and delivery services like Grubhub, Uber Eats, and for a very good reason. I mean, I would say the word that comes to mind for me is predatory. Even now more than ever, they are putting people out on the streets and charging fees. And what do you think is going to happen? I mean, like, you've been advocating from almost the very beginning that there should be a cap on their fees that they can charge. And I think that you kind of were the tip of the spear as far as getting them some attention in not only on a local level, but also on the state level. So, what do you think is going to happen with them? Because I'm consuming a lot more media just like everybody else is, and I'm seeing a lot more ads for Grubhub and Seamless. And so it seems like they're kind of putting their flag in the ground, and they're positioning themselves to be a part of the solution when they're in fact actually making a ton of money on this.
Yeah, listen, the Grubhub Seamless, they are predatory. They're exploiting a crisis. They were horrible before this pandemic, and their terribleness, if that's a word, has only compounded since we've been in this crisis. There are delivery companies, third-party platforms that have stepped up and reduced their fees or eliminated their fees and really introduced services to help restaurants through this trying time. Grubhub Seamless is not one of them. They are spending all this money on commercials and other types of ads, which frankly is just propaganda, trying to fool the public into thinking that if you order through Grubhub and Seamless, you are somehow supporting local independent restaurants. Couldn't be further from the truth. They charge between 15 and 30% commission fees on each order from you place with a restaurant. That amount was unsustainable in a strong market. During a crisis, it's just, like I said, it's unconscionable that they can keep this up. And then they've introduced new plat programs where they're basically extracting even more money from small business owners. And they're in a difficult place because in places like New York City, where they own about 70% of the marketplace, you can't offer delivery and not be on Grubhub Seamless. And that's part of the problem. They own all the customer data. So if you want to leave, you lose the direct relationship with your customers. And then when they come out and release these programs that they're supposed to help the restaurant industry, that's not what's happening. The terms or conditions are very vague. They're making people sign contracts that have long-term implications. They're not waiving the fees as they first implied. They're just deferring them to a time when they'll collect them at some point in the future. So it's just going to create even more debt. And it's just really sneaky. They're untrustworthy.
Yeah, that's a whole hour of just going back and forth in itself. I mean, it's like they've owned the market, they've cornered the market. So it's like you can't just go out and hire a driver for your restaurant because that's another line item on the budget, exactly. And a lot of people can't afford that right now. So, I mean, setting that aside, you've also been advocating for the legal and regulatory ramifications and kind of blowback that's happened from this, working closely with Fox Rothschild and Bizetsky and Bookman. What do you see happening with the CARE Act and the PPP? And I mean, there's still a lot of it's wildly complex. It's very hard for people to apply. And it's a well that's ultimately going to run dry. And it's kind of really difficult to see what is your recommendation for action for small business owners in New York and nationally?
Sure. So, the PPP, which is the Paycheck Protection Program, which is part of the CARES Act, the third big stimulus package the federal government passed, basically gives business owners 2.5 times their monthly payroll in the form of a loan that can then be converted into a forgivable grant if certain conditions are met. The problem is those conditions are not tailored in a way that makes sense for the restaurant and nightlife industry. So restaurants in New York City and around the country are required by government to be closed right now. What the PPP says is that we will give you this money as a grant if you hire back all of your employees to pre-pandemic levels by the end of June. Well, that doesn't make sense for restaurants because we don't even know if we're going to be able to reopen by June. And if we do, we certainly will not have the pre-pandemic sales necessary to sustain the pre-pandemic staffing levels. So it makes no sense for a restaurant or a bar to now hire back all of their employees that they just laid off or furloughed to only then lay them off or furlough them again at the end of June. And if they are unable to get to the full staffing levels, then it doesn't even turn into a grant. It becomes a huge loan that the business owner has to pay back within 2 years, which is the last thing we need to do is straddle our small business owners with more debt. So that's one big part that's a problem in the PPP for our industry. The second part is there's an allocation of how that money has to be used. 75% of the loan needs to go to labor costs. 25% can go to rent, utilities, and some other expenses. But in high rent cities like New York and really around the country, 25% of the loan is not going to be enough to pay back multiple months of missed rent, utilities, and other expenses. So we've been urging the federal government, as part of the fourth stimulus package, which we hope will be passed as soon as possible, probably towards the end of the month, to make some slight modifications to the PPP. One, allow the loan to become a forgivable grant if people hire back their employees not by the end of June, but by the end of the year. That way, we hope we have some time for things to get back to as normal as possible, have a better idea what is consumer purchasing behavior like, what kind of staffing levels do we need, hopefully get tourists back to New York City, get people back into jobs so they have disposable income to go eat and drink out at restaurants and bars. And the second part would be able to use more than the 25% of that loan towards rent and other expenses like utilities, et cetera. And we also think that you could increase the 2.5 time monthly payroll loan to more than 3 times, as that would get more money into the pockets of small business owners, which will then be just pumped right back into the local economy.
Yeah, it seems like this the whole thing is very short-sighted, and this has kind of been the communication from the federal government that we want to reopen. Everybody wants to reopen, but not at the cost of the national health, because like what the real Dr. Fauci is saying is that if we open too soon, then there's going to be a second wave, and then everybody's going to get sick again, and we're back at square one. So what good is a stimulus package going to do us if we're going to default on all the debt anyways?
Yeah, and listen, there's some industries where it may make sense. If you're still working, but you're working from home, you're working remotely, then the PPP may work for you. But in the case of the restaurant and the nightlife industry, it's clearly different. If you're a bartender, you're not really doing virtual bartending while your bar is closed. You are out of work, so it's not going to help you.
So who is advising the president for national policy, and how? I saw that there was a panel of like some very wealthy people. They're all white men. They're all like multi-thousand unit owners of restaurants. And so who is advising the president, and what are they advising him to do?
Yeah. So the White House just announced this large panel of advisors from various industries, and I think there's maybe 17 or so from the restaurant industry. And listen, they're very accomplished, smart restaurateurs. Don't get me wrong; it's not a knock to them, but they represent all the biggest chains from the McDonald's on down. There's a handful, I forget exactly, maybe 4 or 5, what you would say, kind of independent restaurateurs. Danielle Boulud from the Dynex Group, who's a friend and incredible chef and restaurateur, Thomas Keller, and they're great to have kind of representing the independents. But again, these are not your local mom and pop, business owners. There certainly, as you mentioned, should be more diversity. It's mostly, kind of older white men from large, successful restaurant groups, which are a vital part and segment of the industry, but obviously are not even close to representative of the diversity of the nation's restaurant industry, and therefore can't fully represent the needs of all these business owners. So, listen, it's not too late. You can definitely identify a more diverse group of restaurateurs from around the country. We would love for New York City's restaurant industry to have a voice in that process. But nonetheless, whether we were appointed and had representation directly on that panel or not, we are going to work closely with all levels of government to make sure that our voice is heard every single place, all of the time, because without our industry recovering, the city and the nation's economy is not going to recover.
Absolutely. I think we can probably all agree on the meal expense deduction, though, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, as long as people can go out. Yeah, I mean, as long as people can go out and expense their meals, how does it work now, and what is the proposal for how that would work in the future?
Yeah, so companies used to get 100% meal deduction if they'd go out and have, business lunches or business-related entertainment. Then some years back, that changed, and I believe they get maybe a 50% deduction now. But the president has mentioned it multiple times in supportive of bringing back the 100% deduction. This hopefully will encourage corporate behavior once we get onto the other side of this to go out, eat, drink, entertain their employees and their clients to help spur economic activity. There's been calls to also expand a tax deduction for meals and beverages to everyday citizens. So you could then deduct those meals on your tax return, which I think is another excellent idea, because we're going to have to get people out and about and shopping the local economy. We are the backbone of this country, restaurants and retail. And for a full recovery from an economic perspective, we need people to be spending, but we also need people to get back to socializing and just being out and about. And it's, too early to tell. How are people going to be impacted? Look, I'm sure there's going to be people that are going to, run out of the doors and hug each other and be like, all right, it's time to party. And that's not necessarily a good thing to do at all. I think there's also going to be a lot of people that are going to be very uneasy. I mean, when are you going to be comfortable standing 5 deep at a busy bar pushing through to get your beer? When you go into a restaurant and the host walks you to your table and hands you a menu, are you going to be comfortable doing that? Handing your credit card over. All these little interactions that in the past we never thought about, they are going to become top of mind to people. And I think with time, like all else, we start to forget a bit and kind of get back to our normal behavior. But I think we'll also see things like mobile payments, which are much more popular outside of the U.S., but have been growing, within the U.S., within the restaurant nightlife industry. I wouldn't be surprised if we saw an expansion because it's contactless. Even mobile menus where you can use your own phone to pull up a menu and make, order drinks right off your phone, in a restaurant. There's technology out there that does it. It's not widely, used, but these are types of technologies and trends that we've yet to see, obviously, if they will get a real foothold in the industry. But because of the way of the world today, you could see why people would be more inclined to use them.
Yeah, and I had a previous guest, Chris Lauder, who was talking, and he runs a spirits distributor in China, and he was telling me about how kind of technologically they're a little bit further ahead of us by a couple of years, maybe at least, and how they've been basically pretty well positioned for this because they have been mobile forward and they've been digital forward for years now. What happens if people get used to the idea of dining at home? Could this possibly be the rise of automation and ghost kitchens?
Yeah, listen, I think those, ghost kitchens and, increased delivery, these were all realities that we were living with before the pandemic. I still have this deep held belief that while delivery and ghost kitchens and all of these things are great, they can be great for business, they can be great for convenience. Certainly, they all do pose their challenges, both ghost kitchens and third-party deliveries, which I've written and spoken extensively about, and we somewhat touched on earlier. There is a human need for socialization and interaction. We are the hospitality industry because we show hospitality. We welcome people into our venues to take care of them, to give them an experience, frankly, that they can't have in their home or they can't get from ordering a ghost kitchen. So I do not think this is the end of, kind of in dining and in drinking experiences as we know it. I think that there's going to be a long period of time before things get back to normal. As I mentioned, people having disposable income, people being comfortable to be out in venues. I mean, just think of concerts and music venues and stuff of that nature. When are we going to get back to all of that? So I think in some ways, this will certainly exacerbate who's ordering third party. Are ghost kitchens a more sustainable way to, support your brick and mortar business, or just have a ghost kitchen with no brick and mortar, a virtual restaurant? But the human need is there and people will eventually come back. to be together and socialize.
The reason I was asking in conjunction with talking about China being ahead of us a bit in as far as technology and how they deliver restaurant experiences is because they have been delivering cocktails for years. What would happen if we were allowed to continue delivering cocktails and alcoholic beverages, composed alcoholic beverages?
Yeah, so we'll see. So we were, an intricate part of making that happen. Early on, when restaurants went to delivery only, we had multiple conversations with the state liquor authority about permitting this behavior. Prior, you could only deliver beer. Now you can do spirits and wine, cocktails. And we've heard from some restaurants, it's been a huge boon because people are at home like, I want a margarita. I want, this, I want that. So I think business-wise, it's good. There's a lot of conversations we're having with the state, city, and hopefully the federal government about when we reopen the economy, what is it going to look like? And I would be an advocate for keeping these policies intact because, like I said, people may not be ready just to go out to restaurants and bars and eat and drink, but they still may want a nice cocktail delivered to them with their food for dinner. So I think it makes sense economically, as long as it can continue to be done responsibly for the industry. And it's going to be part of a whole, what I'm calling a restaurant rescue and save nightlife plan. That's going to be a list of policies that need to be enacted at the city, state, and federal level to help restaurants and bars during the immediate crisis, during the more kind of immediate aftermath when we start to reopen to the public, and then during the long-term recovery period. And there's some concrete policies when it comes to streamlining the permitting and licensing processes involved with state liquor law, health department, labor law, regulation. So, all of these things are going to have to be done in a coordinated fashion. And then I suspect as we start living through the recovery, we're going to face new challenges and have new ideas of policies that we need to enact to give businesses the best footing possible to recover, to keep people hired, and provide great experiences that New Yorkers and everyone want when they go out to a restaurant or bar.
Are you in communication with similar organizations across the country? I know that you had a relationship with like the DC Alliance, and tell us about that.
We've spoken closely with the Restaurant Association in DC, folks really all around the country, even the State Restaurant Association, and just trying to get a hold on what are they hearing from their businesses. While every situation's definitely unique, there's so many similarities, especially in the more metropolitan places. But really across the country, it doesn't matter if you're in a suburb, a country, or a city. If you can't run your business, you have significant challenges. And if your customers are not going to be comfortable coming back to eat and drink, there's challenges. So we've had those types of discussions, conversations about what kind of policies are you advocating for? Are there policies on a national level that we can work collectively to address? And not only within our space and industry sector, but also talking with folks, in tourism, in travel, hotels, and other related industries, because, we are so interconnected. When someone comes to New York City, for example, as a tourist, they're traveling here, they're staying at a hotel, they're going out to a restaurant, they're going to a Broadway show, they're going to a museum, then they're going out to get a drink. So we all are very interconnected. And that's why if we can speak as in the most unified voice as possible, where it makes sense, we have a greater opportunity to get our voice heard and our policies enacted.
So I just got one more question for you because I know your time is extremely valuable. You've been doing all these morning shows, and oddly, Fox News is an oddly sympathetic network for nightlife, right?
Yeah, it's amazing.
that wasn't the question, but.
Listen, I've been doing some Fox News. It was amazing. I did it, and my phone and email and every social media channel, blew up, and people from small towns to big cities were super supportive. They thought what we have to say makes sense, and they all recognize that they want to get back to a sense of normalcy. And to do that, they need to be comfortable to go to their local restaurant, whether it's a fine dining restaurant or where it's your neighborhood, Italian restaurant, or it's a coffee shop, or it's your pub, or it's like some fancy, bar. It doesn't matter. People want to get back to whatever normal was for them pre-pandemic.
Big ups to Fox for giving you that platform, because I think that's where the president gets a lot of his instruction. But the last question I wanted to ask you was, Andrew Cuomo has kind of emerged as this national political hero, and he has gotten a lot more credibility as being a credible source of information, especially from New York, which is the hub of a big epicenter of the pandemic. What was your opinion of him before, from a professional standpoint, like as far as his sympathy towards the hospitality industry, and what is that now? And what is that now? I mean, what do you think of him now?
Yeah. So listen, from my perspective, in my professional role, which is also, frankly, my personal role, because I live and breathe this, it's to represent the interests of the New York City restaurant and nightlife industry. So clearly, it doesn't matter if you're the governor or the mayor or any elected official. We may not always agree on every policy, but you want someone who's willing to listen and debate the issues if you disagree, or agree and implement them where you do. And I think the governor has been masterful in many ways, both pre-pandemic, but this has given him an opportunity to really shine a spotlight on his skills. And I think Governor Andrew Cuomo in particular excels during a crisis. And that's time when many leaders stand up and people take note because they're concerned and they want leadership. And I think he's done a phenomenal job there. I think he and others have rightly been focused on containing the public health crisis and ensuring, to the best of their ability, public health and safety, although it's a crisis. I mean, there's thousands upon thousands of people dying that are sick. And again, there's no real end in sight. But when people are scared and concerned and there's a lot of uncertainty, they want someone not to BS them. They want someone who's going to be transparent and truthful and straightforward with them. And I think he's really excelled at doing that. So I give him a lot of respect. I know he has now brought together the governors of many of the tri-states, and he is putting together a panel to discuss how we are going to reopen our economy. So we're very much looking forward to being part of those conversations. And if he continues to use the same, leadership skills that he's using during the crisis, I suspect he'll continue to do that and apply those traits during the recovery. And that's where we'll really need the governor, but also the state senate and assembly, the city council, the mayor, to all work collaboratively to enact policies quickly to help get us back on our feet, because it's not going to be easy. It's not going to happen quickly, but we need to do it together. And someone had said to me the other day, which I thought was a great kind of analogy. He said, it's very difficult to change the tires on a car when you're moving. But now that we've kind of come to a stop, let's figure out, how do we build this car back better than ever? And I hate to be overly optimistic in such a dire situation, but we do have a unique opportunity. There are many problems for our industry from a regulatory standpoint and many other perspectives before this. So how are we going to rebuild to make us stronger and support all those that need support?
From the New York City Hospitality Alliance, I think it's important that you go to the nyalliance.org and get on the newsletter, because it is absolutely essential to have that concise information. And if you're so inclined, definitely become a member. I'm a member, and it is 1,000% worth it. Andrew, how would we find you on social media?
Perfect. So I am, because we used to do a podcast together and you helped us get started. So we are forever grateful for that. So you had told me we are on Twitter at the NYC Alliance. That's at the NYC Alliance. I am on Twitter at Andrew Rigie. Andrew spelled normally, Rigie, R-I-G-I-E. Website, thenycalliance.org, thenycalliance.org. You can sign up for our website. You can find us by our name on Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram. I don't know. There's so many channels. Just
we'll put all the links on the show notes for sure. But thank you so much for being so generous with your time and information. It is a treat to see you and hear you again.
Well, hey, you too. Everyone stay safe, healthy, and cheers to getting to the other side of this.
So I can't thank Andrew enough for his time. It's extremely valuable right now. He's like literally doing morning shows on national networks, and he stepped aside to give me some time to help me understand a little bit about what the Alliance is working on, and it is extremely important. They had a hand in setting up Cocktails to Go in the city of New York, for instance. So they're not just some lip service organization. They're actually creating direct action. Head to their website, the nyalliance.org, and make sure you sign up for their newsletter. It is extremely dense and valuable information. I hope you enjoyed this episode with Mr. Andrew Rigie, the Executive Director of the New York City Hospitality Alliance. Be sure to check out the show notes for a brief summary of the show and links to all the stuff that we talked about. A special thanks to Danny Messina for editing and post-producing the show. If you like this show, you might enjoy another project I'm working on called The Industry Distilled. We read the news so you don't have to. We go live on Thursdays on Facebook, or you can head to industrydistilled.com for updates. I want to keep these shows as short and dense as possible, but I was extremely grateful for the time that we got with Andrew. If you have any thoughts or questions or ideas, please be sure to reach out to me at Jason Littrell on Twitter and Instagram, or search for Jason Littrell on Facebook and LinkedIn. If you got anything out of our time together, you can thank me by simply sharing this with another person. If you loved the show, please hit the subscribe button, leave a rating, review, or comment on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, Pocket Casts, iHeartRadio, or wherever you get your podcasts. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and I can't wait to see you next time. Thank you. Be well.